Okay, good afternoon, everyone, or morning, depending on which side of the country you're on. About a month ago, we talked about JVs, joint ventures. And just to recap before we get into the teaming agreement aspect of this, we're just going to recap on what a JV is real quick. So a JV is just a combination of entities, persons, businesses that combine into one entity, legal entity, that is. So you have a small business, large business, spin off, create a LLC, and then the small business is running the show, 51% owned by them. And now you have a joint business with multiple resources, and then you can compete on efforts. Believe it's 3 efforts up to 2 years. JVs usually last 2 years with a possible extension. The implications here, 51% owned by the small business concern in order to get that small business certification standard. 40% limits here, so 40% has to be done by the small business, 40 by the other, and the rest can be split up between subcontractors, etc. Past performance on either company can be used since you're now one legal entity. Again, 2-year commitments as a legal entity, and you may have this extended not only by your legal counsel, etc., but by the contracting officer themselves on the effort that you're working on. And it must not be permanently staffed by the experts in the field. You can have administrative personnel working for your company, but you cannot have it fully staffed by one or the other company. And then we'll continue. So that's just joint venture in a whole. And then we'll move on to teaming here. Next slide. Oh, okay. So aside from we're getting into something a little different than a joint venture, which is a whole nother monster, which is just the legal entity portion creating. You have harder times with disputes, etc. So you have a government solicitation or effort or program that you found. You realize, so you identify the requirement, and then now you realize that you do not have the capability to do this effort alone. So you need to find a teaming partner through teaming arrangements. So you can find a little stint of what the teaming arrangements are under FAR subpart 9.6, which is just a combination of two or more uh, individuals or companies to perform in a prime subcontractor type environment, which is different from a JV, which is combination into a legal entity. You're now doing a prime subcontractor type work here. And then one thing to note with teaming agreements is that it is specific for one solicitation or government program. So in this case, you have a Polaris effort. So thinking about Polaris, if you're a small business and you are short of technical capabilities, financial capabilities, relevant past performance, it's a good idea to go out and find a teaming partner. And continue. Okay, so once we identify our potential requirement in the need of a teaming partner, there are some benefits for the teaming agreements. One, instead of a legal JV where you have to put all your bread in one basket, a teaming agreement is a good way to test the waters by limiting your exposure to going full in to another company to combine a legal entity. So you I guess lower your risk by teaming with a partner to test the waters prior to joining creating a JV for them. So you limit your obligations via prime subcontractor, you limit your work, you limit your costs, etc. So you're just spreading out that risk a little bit. Um, Also, with teaming agreements, everything is negotiable on a teaming agreement. That goes to the work share, your termination provisions, which are a must, exclusivity, which just means that Are you teaming with multiple people? Are you teaming with just one person? You have your non-solicitation, which means that you can negotiate, hey, don't steal our key employees and we won't steal yours, etc. And again, this is just another type of tool to use to test the waters before entering into a full-blown JV with someone that you are unfamiliar with. Um, and again, it's something that you can spread the risk upon prime and subprime with the cost proposal. So it's not going to be as expensive to you as a whole because you are now disseminating some of that cost down to the subcontractor who helps you prepare the proposal, and then you submit it to the government. And again, one thing that you have to take into consideration here is that the Polaris RFP does state there is a subcontracting limitation here at 50%, which just so they are looking that the prime is not acting as a pass-through and relying highly on a subcontractor. So you have to make sure that you are capable as a company, as a small business, of doing at least 50% of the work yourself. So if you can't really do much of the work and you send it down to a subcontractor, you can be disqualified or not win the award because the limitation of subcontracting clause in there. And then we'll move forward. Okay, so some of the drawbacks. So we have our benefits of, finding a team who can help you win the award via technical capabilities, financial capabilities. Um, you might find someone who is in good standing with the SBA, who is certified small business if you are large. So some of the drawbacks here with a teaming agreement is that you have to renegotiate a teaming agreement for each and individual solicitation. Um, Unlike a JV where you have a legal entity and you can propose willy-nilly on up to 3 contracts, you have to renegotiate for each specific solicitation. So that could be time consuming if you don't have the standard templates ready at your company. Um, so you have a risk. Let's see here. The risk posed. Okay, so you win the award. So congratulations. So you have your teaming agreement signed. You have an NDA with your team, and then you win the award. Congratulations, because you collaborated on the proposal, all that hard work. And now you get your subcontract agreement ready and you cannot agree to the subcontract. You can lose the contract over that if you do not come to terms with a subcontract agreement. So you really have to do your due diligence with the company and usually discuss this in advance of winning the award. So another drawback is that if you are acting as a subcontractor to the Polaris effort, etc., you will not have privy of contract to the prime contract, unfortunately. So you essentially do not have control of the contract. You have to do as the prime says, and that could be frustrating if you don't have a cooperating team member per se. So that's one of probably the biggest drawback there is you do not have privy of insight. You can't just go to the government unless something extremely wrong is happening, saying, hey, can we change this? Can we change that? No, you don't have that insight, unfortunately. So let's move along. Any questions?
And Brandon, I'm gonna tee up the conclusion here, and as we come to this slide, I want to make sure that the rest of the audience is kind of like preparing some questions, but it's a good comparison I have between the JV and the teaming. Kind of curious to see, from the perspective of companies that want to bid in and qualify, if even teaming is even an option based on leveraging past performances and whatnot. So I'll let you go through your slide. I just want to tee up that, to the rest of the audience that, get some questions ready so we can discuss, in plenum the joint venture versus teaming as it respects to qualifying for Polaris. So over to you, sir.
Okay, yeah. So if we think about the differences here between a JV and teaming, JVs are usually more arduous in the legality of it because you're forming a new entity. You have to pick your board of directors if you're, etc. So you have for JV, you have the formation of a new entity instead of just splitting the work share between you already established company prime sub. So you have an arrangement on the teaming side between the prime sub. Um, the size standard does matter on both. However, if you are a small business and you create a JV with a large, the small business does 51%. You can claim that size standard. The size standard on the teaming side does affect who's running the show prime sub, if that makes sense. JV, you have a 2-year period. And with the teaming, you have to, each individual solicitation has to be specific. So there's a prime sub choice there, and you have to negotiate that. Who's the prime, who's the sub? On a JV, you are essentially sharing profit losses since you are one entity. And again, with teaming, you may be a subcontractor to a prime, and you may not share that profit loss as a contract in a whole. You'll just get your portion. The JV, each member of the JV has equal control of the contract, whereas the teaming agreement, the sub has no privy of contract, so you cannot control if you're a sub. So again, with JV, it's very hard to terminate a JV since you are a legal entity. You have to go through all that disputes, arbitration, etc. You have to disilluge your entity. Whereas teaming, you have the appropriate termination clauses in the teaming agreement and hopefully subcontract agreement, where you can terminate on the grounds of uncooperative. You don't win the contract. You can put anything in there to terminate on the grounds of. And essentially, that is the difference between a JV legal entity with teaming prime sub agreement.
And Brandon, as it respects to Polaris, so let's just go specific there, and being able to fill in the gaps that an individual company may have. Can a company actually, or can a team of companies actually share the past performance for the purpose of the solicitation in Polaris? It seems like that's not the case, but I just want you to expand on that. Can you tell us what's the what will be the call on teaming versus JV as it refers to accumulating points to qualify for Polaris?
Sure. Well, as a JV, you are absorbing both companies' past performance history, financial data, etc., whoever brings it to the table. With the teaming, though, it's a little different on the grounds that you are bringing what you have as a company to the table. So if you need someone with a better past performance or more relevant past performance than you have to go out, reach out to them and team with them. And they may want to be the prime versus the sub. So then you have a multitude of choices you have to make and negotiate rather than being in the JV, if that makes sense.
And opening up for everybody else to ask additional questions, and thank you for that answer. As it relates to JVs and teaming and remaining competitive to qualify for Polaris, any questions? Rebecca, any comments from you from your perspective that we can offer to the audience?
Yeah, so I'll just hit on two quick things. One, and if you've downloaded our basic eligibility checklist, you will have seen this. But regardless of the teaming relationship that you form, everybody that's on your team must represent as a small business within NICS code 541512. So whether you're a large business elsewhere or a small business across the board, every single person, prime or sub, needs to be a small business in that NICS code. That's one point I just want to foot stomp because it bears repeating. And then the second thing I want to mention, there have been a lot of questions already asked to the GSA office about these relationships, so they know that this is a sensitive topic and they know they're going to have to give really clear guidance. So I would expect that we're going to see more granularity in future draft RFPs or as more FAQs are released around specific parameters with regards to what's permitted, what's not permitted. As of right now, they're saying like, yes, you can bid as a joint venture. Yes, you can do mentor protege, and you can use either company's past performance as part of your submission. So those are the ground rules right now, subject to change based on reassessment is what GSA is saying about their consideration of all the input that they've received. So that's all I have.
I appreciate, I appreciate adding that additional color. And so again, it seems that, JV is actually a more compelling case, so you can leverage the past performance for the purpose of scoring higher for qualification. But when it comes down to the execution and basically just having a team to go after task orders, again, you have to look at some of those pitfalls that may be related to making sure that A, that it's a small company, and B, that it's actually manifested into the system as having past performance under those snakes, right? So just bear that in mind as you're looking at the complexity of building your team. So thanks so much to you, Rebecca, and for you, Brandon, for adding that color commentary and letting us instructing us on actually the differences between JVs and teamings as it refers to Polaris. With that said, I'm going to move the conversation over to Rebecca, who's actually our main on proposal management. And we're going to talk a little bit again, do a quick review of the relevant experience and past performance as far as how to basically just go through the process of, making sure that you have the highest probability of qualifying by scoring the highest points. So Rebecca, over to you, ma'am.
Yep, thanks, Nelson. So just to kind of set the scene for you guys, I know there's a lot of familiar names on who've attended some of our other webinars, and you guys have probably done some research into Polaris, but just in case, I want to make sure we're all starting from the same page so that everything else that I'm about to tell you makes sense. This proposal is not a written proposal. It's not the type where you have to draw up a tech approach. You're not going to have to provide a management plan with a narrative solution to things. This is a scorecard RFP, and the government's going to award you points based on documentation that you submit to prove the claims that you make. And by the way, a lot of that documentation is not documentation that you will be the author of. So what I mean by that is it might be the contract award documentation, it might be the statement of work or the performance work statement that the government issues. It could be a monthly status report or a formal deliverable that your company has created and submitted to the government in an official capacity. So that would be one example of something that you could control. But the point is, these are not just statements that you're writing and creatively describing how there's relevance between what you say you do and what the government is looking for. Like they are going to be looking for proof in black and white and signed off on by an official government representative that says, yes, we agree with this assessment in order to award you points. The other thing that I want you to understand is that there's going to be, and we'll talk through this on the next slide, but there's 6 volumes right now the draft RFP has outlined. And the two most important ones are the relevant experience and the past performance. And you saw on that previous slide, 70 to 90% of the points are anticipated to be just in these 2 volumes. So it's not that they're important, they're critical. So we're going to spend a lot of time talking about what you can do now to make sure that you've got the best chance for scoring the most points within those 2 volumes. Okay, go ahead to the next slide, please, Nelson. Okay, and actually, if you want to back up one to the volumes, I do just want to hit a couple quick points there. Thank you. Okay, so we talked about there's 6 volumes right now. The volume 1 is just kind of the general contractual documentation. It's going to have the self-scoring worksheet that you fill out and submit to the government. It's going to be where you describe your teaming arrangements. You get commitment letters from anybody that's on your team. You're going to provide your professional employee compensation plan, overtime policy, reps and certs. I mention this because there's some kind of boilerplate stuff that you can go ahead and start prepping now to kind of get out of the way. So your employee compensation plan, the overtime policy, making sure that your company has that squared away and ready to go. That's an example of useful pre-work. We talked about relevant experience. This is divided into 2 categories. The first is primary project experience, and you're going to be permitted to submit up to 7 projects, and there's 5 primary performance areas. And the draft RFP has really specific guidance about what they're looking for and what areas are going to score you additional points. We've also devised, you'll hear me talk about this later, but we've also devised some project evaluation forms that you can download so that you can take a look at any contracts that you have, run them through this checklist and see which areas they hit and which areas they don't. The second component of relevant experience is emerging technology. There's 6 emerging technology areas, and right now the project threshold for these is much smaller than what the project threshold is for the primary project experiences. But you're going to need to demonstrate experience in both of those areas in order to maximize your points. So we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go on here. Past performance, the difference between relevant experience is the contract that you have and the experience that you have. Past performance in this context is how well you've performed it. So this is literally going to be whatever the government has given you for a rating. You know, a lot of DoD agencies use CPARs. Some of the intelligence communities have a different rating system. If there's nothing that the government has formally given you to rate you on the contract, there's going to be a past performance questionnaire that you need to send to your government client. So again, if you think you've got a contract that's going to hit a lot of these areas, start having those conversations now and start asking them like, hey, we're interested on bidding on this. We think we've got a really strong proposal. Are you going to be, you know, willing to not vouch for you, but, you know, validate is what I'm trying to say. Validate that, you know, we've been doing this work and we've been doing it well, because you don't want any surprises there, since this is a rated area. And then volume 4 is system certifications and clearances. So at the IDIQ level, a lot of these things are optional. I will tell you, if you only have commercial experience, you're going to be at a little bit of a disadvantage here, because you probably don't have a, you know, a certified cost accounting system. You may not have gone through the audit yet for that. You know, the facility clearance may not be something that your company holds. So it's not mandatory that you have that, but again, anywhere you can maximize points, you're going to improve your odds of actually getting an award on this contract. Risk assessment, they're going to take a look at your organization, your previous history, how you've been doing in business, if you're a responsible entity. That's kind of ties into volume 6 as well. And just making sure that, you know, you haven't just gone out and teamed with somebody that you don't know anything about, that you're just, you know, sticking with somebody for the sake of bidding on this contract. You know, it needs to be a considered relationship, and it needs to be a low risk one to the government. And Trident, I know this is something we talk about later in the presentation, probably briefly today. We have a prime finder service. So if you're looking to find a teammate that would be, you know, responsible for you and help you fill out your capabilities in a smart way, that's an area where we can assist. And then I already kind of talked a little bit about the volume 6 responsibilities. So they're going to take a look at your financial resources, supply chain risk management. That's another area where you can kind of get that stuff squared away now ahead of the RFP release, so that you're not struggling to get that you know, refined and put down in writing once the RFP comes out. Okay, next slide, please. So with relevant experience and past performance, keeping those two sections in mind, because again, this is where you're going to be able to score the most points. There are a couple things that you can be doing now ahead of RFP release to get yourself in a really good position once the final RFP is released. And honestly, once we have a draft score sheet as well, it's going to put you a little bit ahead of the game. First thing I want you to do is draft your contract lineup. So think about every project that you have that might potentially qualify. You don't need to do the scan in your brain and try to do the yes, no. We have that relevant experience form that you can download and walk through for each and every project. And I want you to do that at this stage so that you know where you don't need to spend any more time and effort. Because my guess is that you've got that list of projects, and anything that doesn't hit the minimum criteria, I want you to down select it. If it's not going to qualify, it's not going to qualify. Don't spend any more time trying to make it qualify. So you want to stay with your most focused opportunities so that you, again, can maximize your points. Next thing you're going to do with whatever's left out, you know, taking your duds out, cross those off the list. With whatever's left, try to rack and stack those based on as many areas as they align to. You're going to want to repeat this step when we get our draft score sheet from the government, because that we expect is actually going to have the weightings for different areas. But again, you're going to be able to see, okay, what's my #1 project that scores the most points using the government's criteria. So you can kind of get a sense of that now. And in addition to racking and stacking those projects, it's going to tell you not only what your strongest projects are, it's going to show you where your gaps are. So you may need to consider a teaming relationship to hit as many of the relevant experience areas as possible. Or you might have a couple projects that are really strong, and you might be in the great position of picking between A+ projects across multiple areas. I want to make a point here, and it's that you can only use a project once for a performance area. So you can't, if you have a project, if you're lucky enough to have a project, fortunately, you can't submit that one for either.
Yeah, looks like we're actually just losing. Hey, Rebecca, can you hear us? Okay, I'm going to pick up where Rebecca left us. She was making a point about the past performance and the fact that you can only use it once throughout the process. Rebecca, are you back? Can you hear us?
I'm back. I'm sorry, guys. I don't know, hiccup with technology there.
I can't hear you. There you
Can
go.
you hear me now?
All right,
okay.
so we can hear you back. We lost you right at the time where you're making the point of like, here's the most important thing, and then we lost you there, of course. But that was exactly the point where you're talking about that you can only use the past performance once. So back to you on that point.
Yep. Okay. Thanks, Nelson. And sorry guys for that that hiccup. So like Nelson said, you can only submit a project against one performance area, and there's an additional caveat, which is you cannot propose your project on multiple proposals. So if you think you're just going to put yourself on every team that asks, and you've got one contract to share, if the GSA looks at your contract and they see it somewhere else, it's going to throw out both proposals. So please don't do that. You need to be strategic about the projects that you put forward. Okay, and then again, this is all driving towards making good decisions about your bid strategy. So do your company have enough relevant experience to cover all the areas, or do you need to find a teammate? Are you an attractive teammate based on the experience that you have? Those are things that if you are thinking about them now, again, you're not going to be, in the frenetic frenzy of trying to sort that out once the proposal clock has started, because that, whether they give us 30 days or 2 months or 90 days, it's going to go fast, especially since we know it's not coming out before the fall. So, Thanksgiving, Christmas, you don't want to be stressed about who your buddies are on Polaris. You want to have that nailed down ahead of time.
Yeah, okay. I want to press the slow down button here, because that last piece is actually just worth money. Okay. So we've shared, through the series, forms, and tools that Rebecca and her team have generated, like, for example, the basic eligibility checklist, and also, the past performance / relevant experience evaluation form. You can get this for free at Trident Proposals. You can actually just go to any of the blogs. The links are there. You can get these forms. Within those blogs as well, there's actually a form just kind of to do additional ranking, so you can work on the stacking of these proposals. And what Rebecca just said right now is very, very important, right? In the past, some of the folks have been able to look at their past performance and just basically just federate that out to all of the partners. And if you were in 3 teams, your past performance would appear in 3 teams. You can't do that here, okay? And so you have plenty of time to build on that strategy, harvest your past performance, look how you want to use it, right? And so Trident has a group of SMEs that Rebecca leads. They can definitely help with the process of building your best strategy to use your past performance and relevant experience so that you can maximize your chances of A, being a good prime, or B, being a great sub. So don't miss out, and please check in those forms out. And actually they're all for free. Again, tridentproposals.com/blog. You can actually just go into any of the blogs. You can get those forms there for free. So double stump on the floor, because that right there is going to come to haunt, some folks, in the near future. Again, let's be ready for it. Rebecca, back to you. Any additional thoughts or comments on your topics, for today?
No, I think that's the big points for today.
All right, great. I appreciate that one. And so we're gonna then just move over to talk about a couple of options and choices. And again, as it relates to the new folks coming on board on the webinar today, courses of actions and options that you have for Polaris. And so you have the option of not bidding it, and if you want to go through that exercise, again, we're giving you the tools for you to realize quickly, is this the best project for me? Am I best qualified for this particular exercise? Coming up in 2 weeks, we're going to have a webinar with C2P, Capture to Proposal, where we're going to go and talk about the empirical way of using data to justify objectively if you're a good candidate, and if not, and again, just giving you additional tools for you to say, do I really want to bid this, and making that bid, no bid decision more objective rather than subjective. As we had mentioned, you can go about it alone if you have enough points. And again, a way to prove to yourself if you have enough points is actually to look at the scorecard. There's an example of a scorecard within, again, the tools that Trident has prepared for the audience. We also know that GSA is actually going to be putting up a sample scoring sheet that's going to happen later on. Again, if you want to read more about that one, that's actually a good article on the blog that Rebecca just posted. And if you're not going to go alone, but you're going to bid it, you can actually do so as a team. That's what we were talking today as far as the options of going through a JV or going through a team. You can see that on all of these instances, the folks here trying to proposal management can help you basically just to do that. So whether you want to evaluate if you're a good candidate, if you want to look for actually to do it by yourself, go at it as a prime by yourself, or if you want to be a team, prime or sub, there are different areas where we can be of help. That's all based on a methodology that is a proven process that has been used for years. Again, this is proprietary to the methodology of Trident Proposal Management Services. Rebecca has been active as me in developing this, and other methodologies, but this is a system that works where you can just make sure that you can figure out, A, am I compatible for the solicitation? Again, the next webinar is going to be empirically looking at, what has been bid on the previous contracts like this, what are the agencies, what are going to be the past performances that are going to be most relevant, and you can begin to answer those questions empirically rather than just subjectively. Once you basically just do your gap analysis, then you can begin to decide, do I go alone or do I go at it, as a teammate? And once you make that decision, again, working on harvesting all of the information, like Rebecca said, this is not content that you necessarily are going to generate. This is content that you're going to have to harvest from other locations, right? So this is very important, because this is not your average IDIQ. Again, this is actually a scorecard level IDIQ. Once you do that, hopefully you can qualify, again, the next element is just be ready for standing up a PMO office where you can actually just look at the solicitations and make sure that you're responding and supporting the contracting office team so that you're not basically off ramp from the solicitation, right? This is actually just all, very important to know as far as the before, the during, and the after. Committing to Polaris actually takes a lot of effort. So we want to make sure that you actually just have, A, the best chance to win, and if not, that you save yourself actually just the effort that you may waste on actually just going after something that, A, may not be a good fit to bid, and B, may not be a good fit because you're not going to get the most out of it unless you're ready for it.